Hey guys, SuperPat98 here, and today I'm talking about Smash Remix. This video is my opinion of who they could add next to Smash Remix to make it an even greater experience. These are like my fan picks, and I'm sure a lot of you nostalgic people out there have already thought that these characters should have been included already, but I think they still could be included. And a lot of these characters on my list are N64 icons, so there's really no reason why they shouldn't be here, especially in Smash 64. So let's begin. Well, number one, Bomberman. I think Bomberman should definitely be in Smash Remix. Bomberman had a trilogy on the N64. There was Bomberman 64, Bomberman 64 The Second Attack, and Bomberman Hero. Bomberman's greatest era was the late 90s, and it was on the N64 and the PS1. But since Bomberman had 3 N64 titles, 3 N64 adventures, and he was such a big icon of that time period, it would just be amazing to see him in Smash Remix, especially since for such a long time, Smash fans in general have been wanting Bomberman in there since the Brawl days. So why not include him? Plus, you can give him the bomb attack, which comes from Link. How Link can create his own bombs? Well, give that move to Bomberman. It's just perfect. Number two, next we have Rayman. Good old Rayman, one of the icons of gaming. His classic game, Rayman 2, The Great Escape, for the N64. We all know Rayman's moves, they're all there. You gotta include Rayman in here. He's one of the biggest platformer icons of all of gaming. A classic, perfect character to add to Smash Brothers. And it would be especially neat to see him in the N64 graphics once again, since Rayman 2 The Great Escape was one of the greatest platforming games ever created. Okay, next we have Isaac from Quest 64. I love Quest 64. I know a lot of people don't love it, but man, I have such fond memories of watching my cousin play it back in the day. It's an extremely nostalgic game for me, Quest 64, and Isaac could have been a 90s icon, and he really wasn't, but if Quest 64 just had some more marketing behind it and maybe some changes in the gameplay, then Quest 64 could have been as big as other platformer games at the time. Even though it's an RPG, it still has platformer elements to it. Isaac is one of the heroes on the N64, and it would be cool to see him use his magic powers as his moves in the game. This would also shed some light on Quest 64 in general, and would really make people nostalgic for the game and maybe make people feel like they want to replay it. Next, we have Glover. Of course, Glover should be here. One of the great icons of the N64. We all know Glover's moves, and he can use the ball and everything. It's just perfect. I also thought that back in the day that Glover reminded me of Master Hand. That makes this an even more perfect match for him to be included in Smash Brothers. Glover is a gaming icon of the late 90s, and he does belong in Smash Brothers, more than any other character here, honestly. Next we have Mega Man from Mega Man 64, which was originally Mega Man Legends, but include this version of Mega Man from Mega Man 64. It would be amazing to see him again on the N64 without his helmet, or you could also add his helmet as, his costume or whatever. We all know his moves. It could be really cool to see that. Very nostalgic. It would also kind of be a little bit of a closure for Rayman Legends fans to see this version of the character again, because we probably will never get Rayman Legends 3, but at least we could bring back this version of Mega Man in Smash 64. Next we have Davy the Chameleon from the Chameleon Twist games. Two pretty underrated N64 platformers, and in my opinion, especially the second one. I loved Davy the Chameleon's design in the second game, but you could also include how he looks in the original. His moves are really unique, and they're very fun. His moves are perfect for a Smash Brothers game. I also think that they took his design and concept for Ukulele, by the way. No one ever talks about that, but I think they kind of ripped off Davy the Chameleon. Next, my idea is to include WIZPIG from, of course, we all know, Diddy Kong Racing. WIZPIG was so awesome, and we didn't get to see him again, really. It'd be just great to see him use his powers that we didn't get to fully see in Diddy Kong Racing, like his moveset in this game. And imagine all the dream matches we can think of. WIZPIG teaming up with Bowser. I mean, it's just awesome. He's such a cool character, and There's just something about him that seems quite fitting to be included in Smash Brothers. Imagine if back in the day, if WIZPIG was in Smash Brothers, the original, we would have lost our minds back then. That's like one of the coolest ideas ever, right? So keep that childhood spirit alive and still think it's cool to include WIZPIG. Why not? Next we have Gex, one of my favorite video game heroes. I know not everyone loves him, but I don't care, I still love this GECKO. It's great to see that Gex returned with the Gex trilogy. Well, kind of returned, but pretty much. I'm just happy to see that it's a new Gex game. I mean, geez. So we did have Gex 64 back in the day, and we also had Gex 3 on the N64. They're both great games, and Gex was an icon of gaming, especially in the late 90s. We all know Gex's awesome, badass moveset from the N64 days, and it could be easily included here. And you got his voice and everything. It's just perfect. Next we have Rocket from Rocket Robot on Wheels for the N64. This is a very cool, charming little character that his game was sort of a sleeper hit, and it's a very good game, but Rocket never got to have the fame that he deserved. I think he should be a fighter in Smash Brothers. Next we have Bumper the Badger. It may seem really odd to include him as a fighter, but I say it's a cool concept to include one of the other Diddy Kong Racing characters, one of the other Rareware characters as a fighter, instead of it always just being Conker and Banjo all the damn time. Rareware had other great colorful animal characters. It wasn't just Banjo and Conker. Everybody seems to forget all the other great Rareware characters. And Bumper, I thought, was one of them. He's a badass person, he's a thrill seeker, and I think it's a cool idea. Next we have the Millennium Star. Yes, from Mario Party 3. I just loved this character back in the day, and I kind of considered him sort of a villain in Mario Party 3. It would be a real nostalgic throwback to see him be a fighter in Smash Brothers. And I know some of you are like, well, what kind of moves can a star do? But you can think of lots of creative moves for him. Things that happened in Mario Party that could be his moveset, and you can even include Tumble the Dice character that I love. Include him like appearing with him sometimes in the moveset. He had an awesome laugh, very cunning, very sleek, very cool looking. I also don't think it's a coincidence that his name is the Millennium Star and Mario Party 3 came out in the year 2000. That's like nostalgia on top of nostalgia. Plus, his moveset could be similar to like Starmie or Staryu from Pokemon. Next we have Rez. Imagine he was a fighter in Smash Brothers, the arch nemesis to Gex. Rez is one of the coolest villains ever, not just in gaming. And he's a very underrated character. I think he's so fucking cool and so fucking badass. I always loved Rez and his laugh. And we did get to see him fight in Gex 64 and a little bit in Gex 3 as the final boss. I think he would be a really awesome addition to add to Smash Brothers. Moving on to more characters I would love to add to Smash Remix. How about Buck Bumble? He's a classic N64 hero, and I think his game is pretty underrated. It's a very good game. It's not as good as they wanted it to be, the programmers who made the game, but it was kind of a sleeper hit, and Buck Bumble was a really fucking cool character. Adding him as a fighter in Smash Remix could redeem his legacy and remind people of that character. It was a very good game. It wasn't just his theme song that was good. The game itself was good. And you can use his gun weapon and give him other cool, sick moves to do and stuff. Next, how about Ed from Tonic Trouble? Ed was such a really charming, very animated character on the N64, and fans always considered him like Rayman's cousin or something. His body is similar to Rayman, and the game was also created by Ubisoft. By the way, some fans say that you could see Ed's skull in like the Hunter's Museum in Rayman 3, which would confirm that Ed is now dead. But I remember playing Tonic Trouble back in the day, and Tonic Trouble is actually a really great game. It really is. It's actually one of the most underrated N64 games ever. So Ed is a cool, charming character. Why not? Just include him anyway. Next, what about Machamp? You can use his sprite from Pokemon Stadium. Especially with his 4 fists, would be a really badass fighter. Kinda surprising that Machamp never appeared in any Smash Brothers game. This would also be really fucking awesome to add another Pokemon fighter to the roster. So now you can have Pikachu versus Jigglypuff versus Mewtwo versus Machamp. 4 Pokemon can now have the ultimate Pokemon fist fight. Next, what about Pierce Brosnan, James Bond from GoldenEye? GoldenEye was one of the biggest N64 games, and I would argue in the 90s it was one of the biggest video games ever. Pierce Brosnan is such a nostalgic 90s hero in general, but since that game was so big, having him be a fighter in this game, especially as a fighter in Smash 64, would be really awesome. He was apparently supposed to be an actual fighter in Melee, but it was scrapped. But having him be in Smash 64 is way more fitting. And maybe you shouldn't use him firing his gun in the game, because that's like a real bullet. That's not really in the spirit of Nintendo, or our childhood, you know. So maybe just have him fight and kick and stuff. Or I don't know, you can think of other creative ways to have him fight. But he could still have the gun in his hand, but not fire it as a weapon? Something like that. Next, MUMBO-JUMBO. I mean, we'd all love to see MUMBO-JUMBO in Smash Brothers, right? I know it might seem a little off-kilter to include him, because what can Mumbo do other than use his spells? How could you possibly have him fight if he just turns you into objects? And then how long would you be turned into an object for? It seems kind of unfair and kind of cheap to have a move set for MUMBO-JUMBO. But Mumbo became one of the funniest and one of the most memorable N64 characters ever of all time. Anyone who grew up in the 90s loves MUMBO-JUMBO, and we all fucking know it. And even though his moveset would be weird, we would all love to see him there, wouldn't we? Besides, there are certain moves you can think of for him to do. He has a staff weapon, he could punch and kick and stuff like that. Not to mention, you were able to play as him in Banjo-Tooie. So I'm sure there's something you can think of. Next, Iggy from Iggy's Wrecking Balls. Because Iggy was kind of a memorable N64 character, Iggy's Wrecking Balls was a decent game, and it was like a sleeper hit on the N64. For some reason, people really had a liking to the character of Iggy, but nothing ever became of him other than his 90s video game. So why not include him here as a fighter? Does seem kind of weird. I mean, what kind of frickin' moveset could you come up with him? But I'm sure you can think of something. Who knows, he could be one of the most fun fighters you can have in Smash Brothers. Next, what about Chunky Kong from Donkey Kong 64? With his badass muscles and his hilarious expression on his face, Chunky was one of the funniest N64 characters, and I always loved Chunky Kong, and why not include him? It would just be so awesome to have Chunky, Lanky, DK. I mean, come on. We would all just go bananas. Next, as a fighter, we have Adeline, if I'm pronouncing her name right. She's the really cute and adorable painter character from Kirby 64. I loved her character back in the day, and for some reason her character was really memorable, probably because it was such a unique character, and she would have these drawings that would attack the enemies and stuff. I think she would be a really cool and neat character to include in Smash Remix. I mean, why not? Also surprising that the Adeline, if that's how you pronounce her name, how she's never appeared ever again. I think that's really frickin' stupid. Next we have Regulus from Bomberman. Regulus was a badass character, and you really never saw his face. He always had this big mask on him. Regulus appeared in 2 Bomberman games on the N64, so that's why I think it'd be cool to include him here. He was in Bomberman 64, and he was in Bomberman 64 The Second Attack. His dialogue was really mysterious, and his name was cool. You can just see him having really cool moveset in Smash Remix. Next, what about Paper Mario from, well, Paper Mario on the N64? A lot of people have already come up with this idea to include Paper Mario in Smash Brothers in general, but why not include him in Smash Remix? It's pretty perfect. That is, if they can find a way to create a flat sprite for the character. Next, Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim did actually get a 3D platformer on the N64, known as Earthworm Jim 3D. For some reason, it has a really bad reputation, and I like the game. I think it's pretty good. Yeah, it's annoying, I know. It has flaws, but it's still a really cool game with a very unique concept where the entire game takes place in Earthworm Jim's brain. It does feel like a Saturday morning cartoon, and I love that about it. I loved Earthworm Jim back in the day, and he was one of the gaming icons of the 90s, and he was on the N64, so why not include him as a fighter? I'd love that. Next, the final character on my roster, what about Slash from Snowboard Kids. I always loved Slash, and I loved all the Snowboard Kids, and you really could pick any of them as a fighter, but I don't know, why not Slash? He was kind of the main character, almost. Those two games on the N64, Snowboard Kids 1 and 2, were so great. Even though they're slow, the gameplay, the more you play, the more fun it becomes. Especially Snowboard Kids 2 is very underrated. It's actually better than the first game. I think including Slash, imagine him using his snowboard to attack people. Oh my god, it'd be so memorable. And especially the box art for the original Snowboard Kids on the N64 was a really memorable cover that you just saw on the store shelves back in the day. Anyway guys, so this is my roster of characters. These are my fantasy characters I would love to see in Smash Remix. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please hit the like button and subscribe to SuperPat98. And thank you all for watching. Have an amazing week, and I'll see you all again next time.